Well, welcome everybody to an episode of Town Global. I'm your host, Gabbo, and here we bring some of the inspiring people that we find on our paths. In this case, this episode, we have someone who I met not that long ago, but has a very interesting story. She lives in Chapel Hill. She was born in Bolivia. Uh, but I'm gonna let you speak, Nora. Welcome to this podcast, and don't we start with like telling the audience who you are and what do you do for a living?
Hello, Gabriel. Thank you so much for having me in this episode. And it's going to be an honor to be part of it and talk a little bit about my life, my story, and hopefully somehow the listeners can learn a little bit about um, from my experience, basically. So, as you mentioned previously, I am from Bolivia. I moved to the United States about 20 years ago. I did not speak any English. I thought I knew some English, but when I moved to the US, I realized that I did not speak any English at all. But beside the English, as a language, also like the regular English, I had to learn a lot about the slangs. But one of the most difficult things for me to learn, beside all the technical, grammatical stuff of English, was to learn the culture. Um, I think when we learn a new language in general, of course, we need to learn the technical stuff, grammar, vocabulary, and everything that involves the language. But also, I think speaking and learning that specific language is going to help us to understand and open our mind to different culture as well. And that's what happened to me when I learned English. When I moved to the US, and again, I didn't speak any English and didn't realize how important to understand the language. And I want to mention this because as a immigrant in the US, a lot of people don't speak English. It's a very difficult thing. I am a very social person. I'm very extremely talkative. So one of the hardest thing in my life as an immigrant was not to be able to speak with people, not to be able to understand, um, just to have a regular conversation. Um, Beside that, I have learned that you understand where the people are coming from when you understand the culture. And as we know, language is part of the culture in any culture, basically. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about, I'm not going to say mistakes because, of course, we made mistakes, but it was just the ignorance about learning a language and the culture again. For instance, my first job uh, the, in the US was I moved to Baltimore. So my first job was at Dick's Sporting Goods. I was in the back room processing the merchandise, basically all the boxes that were delivered by the truck. And I need to get all the clothing. Basically, I was in the clothing department. And I need to fold, I need to hang, I need to just separate everything. And I didn't speak any English, and everybody in that store didn't speak any Spanish at all. So I remember that I was, again, it was very difficult, but at the same time, I was kind of happy because I knew that was going to help me a lot with my English. But I remember that one uh, time, each department, like the shoes department, the clothing department, and different sections that specific store has their own manager. So my manager was having an interview with a lady that was overweight, and the other manager next to my department said, "Hey, you're going to have a new coworker." And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Yes, Amanda, my supervisor is having an interview with her." And I said, the fat girl, because she was overweight. And he started laughing so hard. And I said, so I didn't say, why are you laughing? Because I didn't know how to say that, right? But I was like, obviously with my face like clueless. Um, he said, well, you call her fat. And I said, but she's fat. So, and they laughed, and she was one of my coworkers. So they started laughing so hard, but I was seriously, I didn't understand why they were laughing so hard. So I went back home, and my former husband, I said, hey, this is what happened. I said, why they were laughing so hard? And, I mean, he grew up in this country. So she said, because you call her fat. But there wasn't no explanation. So I was still trying to understand why they were laughing. And when when I mentioned this story to somebody that speaks English and Spanish, but basically the person learned English older and lived in this country for a while, they said, never, ever, ever say fat in this country. But the only thing that as a Latina, it's very normal to have nicknames. Mm-hmm. Like my family calls me gorda or gordita with affection, right? Because yes, I am overweight. Especially my family. My family, everybody's skinny. And we call somebody negro because they're darker skin. Or I remember a friend that we used to call him mono, monkey, because he looks like a monkey. So to me, that was normal. But when I moved to the US, I learned that basically in the United States, I don't know in other parts of the world that speak English, but it's not necessarily the US. Basically, you don't have to use any adjectives to describe anyone. Right. Specifically, physically descriptions, right? So maybe we can just, if we want to talk about someone that we don't know, we can say just a lady that is with a red t-shirt or something like that. But I didn't know any better. So I didn't know that calling someone black was also offensive. But going back to learning the language, that is one of the most important things. And also one of the most difficult things, because when you are born in a culture where something is very normal and natural, and you have to learn that is the opposite where you're living now, and you have to adjust to that new system and culture, it's kind of difficult. And especially my personality, because I am very straightforward and I don't like to sugarcoat things. I'm still trying to deal and figure out what is the best way to express myself without without being
Without judgment.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, judgment, because it's not that I wanted to judge, but it's just the fact that to me, certain words or certain things are just natural to say or to mention, but in the American culture, it's not. Yeah. So, and the way I am, I have to be very careful when I speak with some Americans, because I don't want to be misunderstood because the way I say things, basically. So one of the challenges, or the first challenge in moving to the US, was the English, again, learning the culture, and then learn how to be an employee in this new system. I have different jobs. I have done a little bit of everything, to be honest. I have worked at the YMCA as a before and after school program director, and then I became a coordinator. I was in charge of the biggest summer camp that Maryland has. I was in charge of responsible for over 500 kids. I didn't know any better. I work as a assistant manager at Home Goods, retail, and then I work as a vocational rehabilitation manager, assisting people to see if they're going to be able to work, to do what they knew how to do, depending on the kind of accidents they had. And then my last job was at UNC as a social. Well, my title was Medicaid Eligibility Specialist. The way I can describe it is more like a social worker. Mm-hmm. Basically, I need to obtain Medicaid for those patients that didn't have any health insurance. I have to appeal the decision sometimes, and basically that was my job. So I was there for 7 years, and one thing that I have learned is that life is too short. And again, because of my personality, I just couldn't do anymore this type of work because I just don't like to say, yes, I'm going to do it just because they pay me. What I mean is, UNC went through so many changes in the last years, and it has grown a lot, which is really, really good. But at the same time, I felt like I was working for a human factory, that it was all about numbers. And I just couldn't do it anymore. So I decided to quit UNC and open my own business. So, so right now,
When you were, so you started in Bolton, right? How did you transition all the way to North Carolina from UNC?
okay, I like to travel. Um, I like to travel because I think traveling is the best way to open your mind. So with my ex-husband, we used to travel a lot, and we came to North Carolina, specifically to Carborough, to visit his aunt. I'm sorry, his aunt, and I fell in love with Chapel Hill. Maryland, where I used to live, was about 30 minutes away from DC. So the lifestyle is extremely different because of the traffic. Just in general, it's very, very different. Um, and I didn't like it, my lifestyle, because the traffic was so bad that it changed your whole life. Probably my ex-husband used to drive close to 4 hours every day to go back and forth. Even though my house was, theoretically 30 minutes away from DC, he used to work in DC. Um, it would take him more than 2 hours to get home because of the traffic. And then something that I didn't like. I didn't want to live that way. So I lived there for 8 years. And then when we came to visit his aunt, I really liked it. And I said, oh my gosh, I would love to live here because it's more relaxed. It's like you can enjoy more life and just not necessarily spend 4 hours of your time, which is life, in a car driving. Um, so he gave me the surprise, say, hey, I just, he knew that they had an office in Raleigh, and in Charlotte because he used to work for the biggest companies of construction in the US. So they have offices everywhere. So he came one day and he gave me the surprise that he asked for his transfer. So he was transferred. We lived in Charlotte for 2 years, and then I was stuck in my mind that I wanted to live in Chapel Hill. So we finally moved to Chapel Hill, um, specifically Carborough. And I also wanted to work at UNC for two reasons. To have that experience, UNC Hospital is the biggest in North Carolina. So it has amazing, it belongs to the state, so it has great benefits. One of them is education benefits, so they pay for your education. So I took advantage of it, and I obtained my master's degree in psychology, and UNC paid for it. But also different benefits, like the regular benefits that most companies give you, just the health insurance, but also what they back then used to have very good was the retirement benefits. So I wanted to take advantage of that, and then I decided to get divorced, and then as a challenge for myself was to open my own business. So with the savings I had, I decided to open the food truck and quit UNC.
When was that? Which year?
That was in 2018. Yeah, so I got separated in 2016. One of the biggest challenge was to obtain my master's degree. So I did it while I was separated because in the in North Carolina, you cannot get divorced immediately. You have to wait a year in case you want to reconcile with your husband or wife. Did not happen. So I went through the divorce thing, and process, and then my divorce was finalized in July 2018. I got separated in 2016. We started the whole process a year after. So I got divorced in, um, I believe it was August 2018. Um, so I decided to quit UNC, and I left UNC by November 2018. Um, it was interesting because my I was pretty good at my job because I really enjoy um, making a difference in somebody's life, and that's why I saw my job with my patients at UNC. I did my best to obtain Medicaid, which is a health insurance. And in the United States, the health, the what is it called? The health industry, I guess, is, is a big subject to talk, right? It's not the best we're going to put it away. So having health insurance in the United States is extremely, extremely important. So making a difference for my patients obtaining a Medicaid, which is a health insurance, made me really happy, and I could see that was making a difference in the lives of some of my patients. But I couldn't do it anymore, so I decided to quit UNC. I left UNC again in November 2018, and then I sat down and I Googled how to open a business. Um, I always mention this because they say, "Why a food truck?" I don't know. It was stuck in my mind. I always like food trucks for some reason. Every time I saw a food truck, I would stop and eat it. But I don't know. It was stuck in my mind, and they say you're going to quit UNC really to open a food truck. And I'm talking that food trucks back then were not. They didn't have the best reputation. So I'm working to work at UNC it's not easy to get a job at UNC for all the demand. I mean, it's a huge institution, so I was lucky to be able to get in very quickly, fast, and easy. But I have some coworkers that have been applying to work at USC for 5 years, over 5 years. So they were like, "Are you really going to be an owner of a food truck and you're going to leave UNC all the benefits and everything?" I was like, "Yes." Because again, also working at UNC, I learned that life is too short, and most patients that were dying back then, they said, what I regret the most is for things I haven't done in the past. So I didn't want to do that. I don't want to ever go through that, dying and just not being able to do what I wanted to do just because we are afraid. We just like to live in a secure spot, let's say. So I decided to quit, and then I Googled it, how to open a business in North Carolina. I was clueless and everything because I have never worked in the food industry. I have never had a business. My family never had a business. So, but I did it. I found this amazing company or institution. It's not a company, institution that is called Prospera that helps Latinos with entrepreneur Latinos. They assist me with everything. I mean, since you have that in mind and that idea, they help you with every single process step. So they helped me greatly. They gave me grants. I mean, they hold your hand and they go step by step with you, which is really, really good. And I recommend Latinos to contact them if they really want to open their own business. They're really good. So they helped me. We ended up opening the food truck in June 2019. We were the only.
Did they give you a specific advisor for your project, or were you talking to different advisors working with Prospera?
I didn't speak any advisor back then.
Ah,
Yeah, I just went with my idea, which it wasn't a bad idea, right? But if I would go back, I would have done a study of the market before. Um, but yeah, back then I didn't have any advisor. advise me how to open my business bank account. So they guide me. They guided me with all those steps. Again, that are very technical in order to get registered in North Carolina. All those steps. But um, later on, I applied for a grant that they work with this amazing gentleman. His name is Henry. I call him my angel because, um, as I mentioned previously in the Spanish version, Gabriel, we like to dream and we just want everything. And we can do this and we can do that and we can add this to the menu. We can do that and so many things and so many ideas as entrepreneurs that you need somebody to say, hey, wait. Yeah. Let's do it step by step, right? We need to learn and not make those big mistakes just because you're selling and then the business is doing good, but at the same time you don't want to crash it. So I have the privilege to work with him. So I applied during the COVID, I remember, because as Latinos, we show our appreciation with food, and there is this big mentality that a lot is better. And that was on my plate. So I was like, oh, I really like this customer. So I'm going to give extra food and I'm going to give extra meat and I'm going to give, and then at the end of the day, I wasn't able to pay the credit card. And of course, back then it was just my husband, Hans, and myself, and one employee that we started the food truck with. And so I was like, oh yeah, I really like this other customer. Let's do some extra cheese dip or some extra. So I didn't realize how important it is to measure the food because we have to pay for every crumb of salt, for instance. I mean, nothing is free, but I was giving food free and I didn't have anything in return. So, and of course, my amazing customers came back and stuff like that, but I needed money to pay my credit card. So I applied for this grant and I started working with Henry, and he's the one that pulls my feet down to earth and says, hey, we can achieve that, but let's do little by little, baby steps. And he has helped me to stop and understand how important are the numbers in a business. And that is one thing that a lot of businesses don't take into consideration sometimes. We just go with the idea with, yes, let's spend all the money, let's borrow money, let's do this and that, but we don't understand how long it's going to take us to take them to recover the money, let's say, or to bring the money back. Is it really a good business? If I'm going to spend such amount of money, how long is it going to take for me to get it back and start making profit and stuff like that? So I didn't have that mentality until I met him, and he showed me how important it is to look at the reports, to look at the numbers, to work with numbers, because that is basically business. A successful business, I guess, part of it. And so after I was working with him, one thing that I needed to do was to start measuring every single thing on the dish, work on the recipes, which was the most tedious thing in the restaurant food industry. But I had to do it, and I needed to change the size of the dishes. It was just a free structure of the things I thought it was correct without knowing anything. So that's when I started seeing the difference in the price. I mean, the bank account and the reports and the stuff like that. So I tried to stick to it. Sometimes it's kind of hard, but and because my personality is Latino, and we always like to say, hey, this guy is nice, so I have to be kind of strict with that and put that structure in the business. But so that helped me. So going back to when we started the Ta-Contento, basically the food truck was on Franklin Street. It was the only food truck in Chapel Hill. So we were focused on students, basically, because 43% of the population in Chapel Hill are students. So that was what we wanted to focus on. And then that was in June. 2019, we were doing it for 6 months. It was a really hard working because, again, it was just my husband, myself, and one employee that we could afford to have. So we would do, back then, we used to work from 5 p.m. to during the weekends, Friday and Saturday, we used to open until 4 in the morning. And then Sundays, we had to get up early, go and cook and clean everything and cook for the whole week. It was very challenging. And then in March 2020 is when COVID came. Chapel Hill was dead because everything was online. So the students were gone. So life changed, right? So exactly. So we need to figure out. I left my job. My husband left his job. So we need to figure out how to survive with the business. And then what we started doing was starting to serve in different neighborhoods during the COVID, which it was an amazing experience because it's interesting how the potential that a person has when we are in between, not in between, when you have no option, basically. And that's when you realize how intelligent we can be. It's just amazing how the brain works. So one thing that we would need to figure out how to provide the best thing we could ever provide to everybody in those neighborhoods. We started working with some friends that were left. I mean, they didn't have a job because the restaurants closed. So we hired them to do deliveries from the food truck to the neighborhoods. Somehow I learned how to create a menu on a website where people could place their orders online. And then we got orders via phone, text. And it was just amazing because we were like a team of 12 people working on a daily basis, delivering, preparing the food. And apparently Ta-Contento was a place for those families too that were stuck in their houses with their kids, their jobs, cooking. So having Ta-Contento to come once a week, it was a great relief for them. And then we have served probably over 10 neighborhoods in the area. And then we were becoming more popular. And then when life started going back to normal, food trucks became extremely popular because it was the only way to be outdoors, basically to do events, to do celebrations, birthday parties, neighborhood parties. I mean, after, how COVID has damaged us emotionally, psychologically, more than the others. A lot of people lost their families, or not necessarily families, but dear ones. So having a food truck and any event, it was like, oh my gosh, amazing. And now it became kind of the trend. And we are pretty popular in the area in Chapel Hill. So we saw that there was more demand, and we needed to have our own kitchen. And that's when we started looking for a place to cook, to prepare the food, to store the food. And we decided, well, it wasn't decided that one location became available, and I went after the owner and we worked it out. So now we have the Ta-Contento restaurant. It's a takeout restaurant because that location used to be Burger King. So it's considered more like a takeout restaurant. And that restaurant also serves us to prepare everything for the food truck. So we still have the food truck and the restaurant. And now we have a new addition, which is the van with dessert, which is it's a complementation to the food truck because a lot of events, schools, corporate offices want the food truck, but at the same time they want to have like a dessert. So a lot of time they say, hey, why you don't have like dessert with you? So that way we don't have to contact somebody else. I was like, yeah, that is a good idea. So we ended up buying the van. So we're going to start The event is going to change the menu seasonally because during the winter we want to serve something warm like hot chocolate, coffee, pastries, and then during the summer we're going to do ice cream, fruit salads, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So thank God we became UNC vendors. So we go to UNC this. We just got the new schedule for the spring, and we're going to be serving on a weekly basis on campus. And then we also have been blessed to be part of the Grab and Go burrito program at UNC. So basically, we serve. We have to deliver burritos and quesadillas on a daily basis on all the UNC campus cafeterias, all the cafeterias on campus. I'm sorry. This has been going on since August, and apparently everybody loves it. And now we also go to UNC games like tailgate that UNC organizes 4 hours before the game, football games specifically, but also the dessert band goes to the basketball games. Mm-hmm. So that is where we are right now. I'm extremely happy. It's always a challenge. And we have an amazing team. We have now approximately 14 employees. And it's just amazing to be able to give work, to have the opportunity for somebody to work. And we have an amazing team.
And everything has happened in a span of like 5-6 years, right? And
yes, correct. So the food truck, again, we started in June 2019. We're still operating the food truck again. And then the restaurant was open in July 2022. And the dessert van, October 2024.
Like there are so many things that are worth talking about, because from the very beginning, you mentioned the language and the culture situation. And I don't know, when I moved here a few times, I realized that English was kicking in. Like I was really getting into the language finally, because I moved here speaking only corporate English. My boss, when I lived in Mexico, my boss was in New York. So we had to communicate, but there are limitations to the language, the vocabulary you use.
Oh yes.
When you move here, you as you said, like you gotta learn the slang. I have no idea what "y'all" means or meant back then, and I don't know if my friends did it on purpose or not. I want to believe that they wanted to help me, but the first place they took me for lunch when I moved to the U.S. was to a local barbecue place. And they were very southern. I had no idea that the accent from New York compared to the accent from the southern states was very different. And when they took me there, like they started telling me the menu, and I understood nothing from what they were saying. And I asked them, like, can you tell me what they said, because I didn't get anything. But then wording, vocabulary is very important. I realized that I started learning English when I started dreaming in English. I don't know if that ever happened to you, because I remember my dreams mostly in Spanish. Like the conversation happens in Spanish. But then at some point I started dreaming in English, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. Did that ever happen to you?
Everybody says that, but I don't recall my dreams. So, to be honest, as far as I can recall, I don't recall dreaming in English. However, a lot of people told me, "Hey, speak Spanish," and I didn't realize I was speaking English when somebody that doesn't speak any Spanish. So, why are you speaking in English to me? I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it." To be honest, I don't remember anything about the dreams, but one thing I remember is that I was learning and getting, as you said, the English, but also the cultures when I started understanding the jokes, American jokes.
Yeah.
And I started laughing because before I was like, that is so, and that's ridiculous. I don't understand. Are they laughing about it? But then I kind of understood and I started laughing. I was like, yeah, that's funny. So I think, again, our brain's so amazing that I started processing English and American culture at the same time that I could understand the jokes. I didn't, to me, they weren't ridiculous anymore. So I was like, oh, I think I'm getting now. I am becoming American. So that is interesting how the brain works. It's just amazing.
And like there are the big difference in vocabulary, even between languages, is very significant because there are some words in English that represent multiple words in Spanish.
Right.
But for some reason, I feel my main language for sure is Spanish. I feel I can express myself better when I speak in Spanish. It's more detailed. But sometimes when you want to capture a bigger idea, maybe English is a better option. When you want to summarize something, or there are words that exist in one particular language that they don't exist in a different one. And I think that's when translators are very important because you need to capture not what the word means, but what the word represents. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, yes. And I realized that, for instance, UNC working with translators that were translating completely different what the doctor or the nurse was saying to the patient. I have to kind of interrupt and say, hey, no, this is not what she's saying because, um, again, it can be, I don't know, there are, for instance, when I am upset and I want to take it out, I need to say something to somebody. To me, it's more expressive to say it in English.
Really?
Yes, than in Spanish. To me, Spanish, like, oh, this is too nice. In English, like, sounds, and probably this, I don't know why, but I have learned that I mean, I noticed, and I haven't learned, I have noticed that in English, I can express better when I'm angry. And I mean, to me, English, when I'm angry, is like stronger than Spanish. It's interesting. That is one thing I have noticed. That
Do you think that's because maybe cursing in Spanish is a little bit more normal?
I don't know, because I think it's what it means. Um, I don't want to say the F word because in English it's not right, but I'm going to say it, okay? But then you can edit it if you see this necessary. But saying fuck you is not the same vete a la mierda, right? So I don't know. It's just different. I'm going like extreme angriness that I would barely say to somebody fuck you, but um, I have noticed that I can express my upset when I'm upset in English than in Spanish. I don't know why.
That's interesting because I feel yeah, I feel the opposite because I feel in Latin America people are more passionate in general about every single thing, and I think it's even the way they say it. Even the tone of the voice changes, and I feel if it was art, I feel that the palette of colors that you can use in English is very limited, and the palette of colors you can use when you curse in Spanish is like really, really big. So you can grab and combine and create your even curse words. And I feel, I don't know, I feel it's a little different.
Yeah, like when we talk about like nice words or more expressive words, definitely Spanish, right? Because as my example, to call somebody gorda or say gordita, it's a big difference. Just adding and this is interesting because you might notice, you might have noticed, or maybe you want to pay attention to when I am with Bolivianos. the Bolivianos speak in diminutive for everything. Hey, let's get together for a tecito. And we're going to have pancito and cafecito and Coca-Colita and saltejita. So everything is diminutive. It's very interesting. And I didn't notice until I moved to the United States and people say, hey, it's not cafecito, it's just coffee. Right? It's not just pancito, it's pan. So when it comes to being more affectionate and nicer, I think definitely Spanish. But I don't know what I noticed that when I want to say something when I'm upset, English is the first thing that comes to my brain. And then sometimes I have to switch it to Spanish because if I say something to somebody that doesn't speak in English, it doesn't make any sense. So I have to, okay, how am I going to say that I'm angry or going to say what I need to say? Not necessarily at all insulting, but just the expression that I'm not happy with whatever feeling I have, you know what I mean? In the upset way. So that is one thing I noticed myself. It could be because when I was learning English, I work with kids, and kids are they have to like, hey, stop, don't do that. So I don't know. In the Spanish, it's kind of different.
Yeah.
So maybe it gave me the power for them to understand me. Just very short words that my brain says, hey, these words work because you can see the result. Like, especially when I was learning English. And I think that helped me greatly too, because the best teachers I had for English were the kids, because I remember there was a girl that her name was Kirsten. And I would say, Kristen. And she would say, no, Miss Nora, it's Kirsten. Repeat it. You're Kristen. No, Miss Nora, it's Kirsten. So maybe my brain made a connection that, oh my gosh, I'm learning English and they're understanding me. Now I kind of like to use those words when I'm not upset or call somebody, but it just has a result, I guess. Interesting. I just started thinking about that.
I think working with kids is very interesting because they don't have filters. They tell you things how they are. And I think, you were mentioning too about how we, in Latin America, we use words that can be offensive here in the US, but they are not there.
Exactly.
And in the last podcast I recorded with someone else, she owns like a hair salon for men. We were talking about discrimination, and I asked her, like, did you ever feel, racism here in the US? And she told me, not really. And I have felt the same. I mean, to be honest and to be transparent and fair, I received a lot of help from locals, from local people here who were born like either here or other parts like Arkansas. Or I have very good friends who were born in the US, and they always helped me. They support me. They showed me around. And I never felt that, even, like talking to strangers, like I never felt racism towards me, but I don't know if it's my particular case or if it's a general perception from people from Latin America. Have you ever felt that you were, victim or target of racism?
Um, I have had two experiences. Um, and this is the thing that it's okay. So when I used to live in Maryland, uh, people would ask me where I was from because of my accent. Um, and they were like very curious, like, where are you from? So how is in Bolivia? So what do you guys eat in Bolivia? What is the play? What is the food? And how is the weather? And people are very curious about learning your culture, where you come from. So it's very interesting. When I moved to North Carolina, I started working at UNC. Again, UNC is the biggest hospital in North Carolina. It's the main public hospital. So you see patients from the whole Carolinas, whole Carolina. So Carolina is very country, right? We are in the triangle, so it's different. But remember going to patients' houses, they're like country, country, country. So one of my job, I mean, one of the first things I need to do if a patient that I couldn't see at the hospital, I need to call and see if they were eligible for Medicaid. So I need to do like a screening questions, regularized questions for Medicaid. And it was so interesting because I had some patients that they were like, you don't speak English. I need to speak English with somebody else. So I didn't take it as discrimination. I was like, oh wow, this is so different where I'm coming from, like DC and the North, right? They were curious about my culture because of my accent. But now for them, I didn't speak in English because I had an accent.
Yeah.
So they were like, ma'am, yes. So I would start speaking as clear as possible, as slow as possible, but people wouldn't understand me. So I said, okay, so somebody else is going to call you, a native English speaker. So I need to ask my coworkers to call the patient and do the screening, and then I will do the rest. So it's very interesting. To me, that wasn't discrimination. It's just that culture in North Carolina is very different than in DC, Maryland, Virginia, because they are more exposed to uh, diversity, I guess. But when we're talking about somebody that has been in a farm for a long time and they have never ever heard an accent, so of course they're not going to understand me. As like you mentioned, I didn't understand a lot of those patients either because of very strong Southern accent. So I was like, okay, somebody is going to call you back. So I don't see that as discrimination at all. But it was a very interesting experience that I need to learn not to take it personal.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But mentioning, going back to your question about discrimination, and I wanted to mention that because I think that's important because we're working with different culture and different type of education too. So, but I remember my my niece was here studying in Arkansas, and again, I like to really travel a lot. So my parents were here visiting me from Bolivia, and we were driving my niece to Arkansas, but we stopped in different cities in different states. And I remember um, we need to check in one of the hotels, and the lady saw me, and I don't look Latina, so she was like, "Oh my gosh, hi, welcome." As soon as I opened my mouth and she heard my accent, even my mom that doesn't speak in English noticed her change. And she was like literally doing me a favor to check me in just because I had an accent. I believe that was in Tennessee. I don't remember, but it was one of those. I think it was in Tennessee. So to me, that is racism because, yes, I don't look Latina or I might look gringo or whatever, but I have an accent. So as soon as I opened my mouth, she changed her everything. And she was like, "You're not welcome here," basically. I could feel that. Even my mom could feel that. But again, I didn't take it personal. I did my check in, I went to my room, and that was it. I'm not going to, I don't even going to spend any energy in that because not my business. And then another time I have noticed some sort of racism too is when I went to Siler City to a winery, and they were like very, very Southern people. And I guess rich people. So as soon as I walk in, again, they look at me like, okay, she's normal, whatever. And then I open my mouth to open my wine. I mean, to order my wine. And they were like, they started looking at me like, where is she from? Where is she from? And I was with my friend from Mexico. Actually, he looks Latino. And my husband, who doesn't look Latino either, but we started speaking Spanish and we went out because the energy became so heavy that you guys are not welcome here. That we took our bottle all the way outside, and we were like, wow, what happened in there? And we were like, I have never felt that. So yes, I have felt some sort of racism, but that is another beauty about this country, that you learn not to take things personal.
Yeah.
And to respect, because whether they like it or not, I'm here. I'm doing everything I can, as I'm sure they are doing everything they can there to live their best life. And that is on them. It's not on me. And I don't take it personal.
Yeah, and I think that that's important because it exists for sure. I think it's more present in this country than everywhere else, from my point of view. That's because of the history and the education system as well. But like we have discrimination in Latin America for sure, a lot. Um, like I believe that people, in particular in Mexico, I think there's a lot of discrimination based on the color of your skin as well. Uh, and in Mexico, calling someone Indian, like native, it's
Offensive.
bad. It's very offensive, which doesn't really make sense because that's who we are,
Right.
And
Exactly. We all are.
and I think in terms of I respect. But let me start with this. I respect a lot the Indian culture, Indian from India. They are very protective of their culture. I think nowadays is changing a little bit because nowadays I've heard hip hop in Hindi, which is very interesting, and they are adopting more the culture from here. And I think I don't know. I've told my friends from India that it's a very interesting situation that I observe, and I think they should be very careful with what they have done so well, which is preserving their core values. Even here, you can see like the congregations of Indians are very closed, and it's hard for someone to enter their circle. And I think what happened in Mexico was totally the opposite. And I think in Latin America, and that's something that the Spanish conquistadores did really well. The best way to take over a different culture is to make them feel ashamed of who they are. And that's exactly what happened in Latin America.
Yes.
And it's really sad that like we feel ashamed of saying like, yeah, I'm from there, and like yeah, we used to have all these rituals and all these kind of things, and, and I don't know. It's really interesting how discrimination works in different parts of the world. What doesn't make sense to me yet is the fact that there are so many initiatives that are kind of trying to protect us from something that we don't feel that we need to be protected. What I mean is that if someone calls me, "Hey, you Mexican, go back to your country," I think my first reaction will be just to laugh about it. But someone else who is not from Mexico will feel offended and they will speak on my behalf. And I mean, I understand, like that's how they think they can bring fairness to this world. But I just feel that we coming from there, like we wouldn't feel offended by that. And I think that's partially the education system.
Exactly. I think that really, as you mentioned, I think it really comes where you come from, literally your education. And I want to tell you my story. It's kind of interesting to me. It's funny. Um, my parents, I cannot be more grateful the way they raised me. So when I was 23 years old, um, well, when I was a kid, they used to call me gringa, which I hated it, hated. Um, and then my nickname, Ruda, because the how white I am, and also because I'm very straightforward. So my best friend called me Cruda. So when I go to Bolivia, my family calls me Gordita, and my friends call me Cruda or Crudita. But anyways, I remember one time they used to make fun a lot of, well, I call it fun, but now it's the bullying word because in my days, bullying didn't exist. Of course, it existed, but not this necessarily that word. But they used to make fun of my no color. It's because how white I am, right? Like, hey, what were you doing all naked? There was a ghost. There was I mean, they used to make a lot of jokes about how white I am. And I remember one time I wasn't, I don't remember how old I was, but I was a kid. There was this specific school that I didn't like because I think they saw me like stranger because blonde, blue eyes, and white. They were like, "Who is this?" So we're going to bully her. So I think they started calling me Albina, uh, and I didn't like it. So one time I went home very upset, and my dad said, "Why are you upset?" I said, "Because they call me Albina." And my dad says, "Okay, why are you upset?" Because they call me Albina. Are you Albina? He said, "No." So why are you upset? I said, "Because they call me Albina. If you were Albina, if they call you Albina, would you be upset?" I was like, "I don't know. You wouldn't be upset because you're Albina. And because you're not Albina, you shouldn't be upset either. So it doesn't matter why they call you. You know who you are." And that was like a lesson that it was stuck in my mind that I remember now. That was extremely important to learn to learn not to take things personally. Um, but anyhow, going back to my story about 23 years old, I was again 23 years old and I went out with this guy on a date. And he asked me, and I don't know if in Mexico, but in Bolivia, there is this social class that you take it in the school. In a school about the story about Bolivia. Not like history, but like a social class, like talking about indigenous, and it's a class that you take in the school. So this guy asked me what social class I belong to. And he knows I'm not in the school anymore. So why is he asking me if I have any class? Oh, he didn't say I belong to. I think, what class do you? I don't remember exactly how was the question, literally, but I remember me thinking like, how is he asking me about this class if he knows that I'm in the university? Well, I think finished university already, but that class you take it in school. So I was like, I don't have any social class. I was like, so damn it, how are you going to ask me that question about social class? I was clueless. So anyways, I went back home. Remember, I'm 23 years old. So my dad said, how was your date? I was good, but this guy asked me if I have a social class or something. And my dad started laughing. He said, what do you say to him? I said, I don't have any social class because that's over like in the school. And my dad laughed even harder. And my dad said, you don't know what he's referring to? I was bad, Daddy. I'm over with school. I don't have that class anymore. And he was, okay, I'm glad you answered that. So what do you say to him? I said, like, I don't have any social class. And he was, okay, that's good. And I was like, I had an amazing relationship with my dad. So I kind of knew he was going to teach me something. So I said, okay, so what is it? So he said, the society has created social classes to, what do you say, to categorize, I guess, the society or human beings. Yeah. And I said, how? I mean, I want to understand what you're talking about. So he said, there is the high social class. I don't even remember right now. High social class, medial class, and the low class, I think, right? And I said, how does that work? And he said, well, it don't depends on the type of, it depends, it's going changing. But before it was depending on the last name you used to have. And then how much money you have. And then he started explaining to me about social classes. And so he was asking me if I had a social class, but I was thinking that my literally classes from school. He said, yes. And I said, well, you never told me. He said, because you don't belong to anyone. Now, society is going to categorize you in one of them, but I won't because you're a human being. And it doesn't matter where you come from, where you're going from. You respect every single one the way they are. And you're going to treat the poorest people the same way you're going to treat the president or whoever, the king of the world. So when I was 23 years old, I learned that we have social classes. So going back to the education, if I never grew up with this mentality that I'm better because I'm white or somebody is worse because they're darker skin. So the way that people approach to me, either because I have an accent in English or because I don't take it personal. And again, I think the best way to open your mind is traveling, understanding that what you know is literally nothing compared to what is out there. And then just to learn. And that's one thing I like. I remember my very good friend is from Mexico. Her name is Carmen. And I would go to like very nice parties and they were like, you don't care about who you talk to. Yeah. I was no. And then I could go to those quinceañeras where little towns in Mexico do. They spend a lot of money, but they're really town people. And I would be the same. And of course, the conversations have to be different. But I have no reason to change who I am just because I am with Mr. Trump or because I am with the most humble woman from a town. So I think that helps you to move on in life and not to take things personally when we talk about racism or things like that, or the way they talk to me because I'm white, or the way they I talk to me because I have an accent. That is on them, and I just leave it to them. So that is one thing I have learned. Well, I was taught that way since I was a kid, but also it has pushed me to grow and to believe that I made that choice to continue being that way.
I think the key to me is you kind of become agnostic to that when you truly know who you are and your own value. Because it, I mean, I believe there is some science behind, some people are more attractive, or the sense of how attractive someone else is based on how symmetric their faces are, and the proportional, and even white or lighter skin tends to be more attractive, right? That's more uh, at a biological level. Um, think like everybody is born with some advantages, some disadvantages, and I think understanding both is very important. Um, I've been working in an industry that requires the tendency is not industry based. I think overall, people who are more attractive tend to get things a little bit easier in life. Um, and there are certain industries, like they would get better jobs, even higher salaries to more attractive people, right? And I mean, is it fair? No, that's kind of how the world is. And I don't think like we can bring everything to a perfect balance. I think we can do our best to become good human beings. But I personally feel that it's stupid for me to organize a revolution and then say like average looking people exist. Um, I think it doesn't really will make a difference. And I think we have to learn what our strengths and weaknesses are, and start from there. Like everybody's gonna have a different starting point on the race. Some people will start further, closer to the finish line. Some others have to start at the very very beginning. But understanding those differences and focusing on our own race is racism. Like racing. It's very it's key. Um, but that's just my 2 cents. I mean, some people may agree, some other people may disagree. But something that I like is that I feel that you kind of embrace also that concept. Um, and I think that's something you also try to transmit because we've been talking about your history, but at the same time, like we have shared experiences, like because like I was present at your business to try to help the staff understanding some of the basic concepts in finances from an educational point of view. It's not just that you know who you are, but also you want people to understand who they are and that they have that potential to become whatever they want to be. So one thing is like how we feel about ourselves, and the other part is how we feel about others. And I think observing that everybody has a tremendous potential is key. And where did you learn that? Is that something that you have always embraced? Did you learn that from your dad? Because it gives me the impression that it happened from those conversations with your dad.
Yeah. Um, well, it's interesting. And there's one thing I always mention to my staff. One of the and I think I mentioned this in the previous in the Spanish version um, podcast is being flexible and respectful. And there's one, yeah, talking about respectfulness, it really definitely comes from my parents. Again, I have never noticed any difference between me and my mom is very Catholic, and so she used to feed very, very poor families by talking like extremely poor families where they didn't have any food at all and they have like 10 kids. And I remember I used to play with those kids. And I remember, as we mentioned, kids are very, very honest and very themselves. um, I remember playing with my amigo Marquitos. He was a, it was a family that they were, I think, five, and a single mom, very extremely poor lady. And, in our countries, very poor people smell. So I remember mentioning to my dad, like, why is he smelling that strong? And so my dad would talk to me into not discriminating just because he has this particular smell that not taking a bath for multiple days. But at the same time, he pushed me to accept who he was without putting him down, if it makes sense. So that I grew up with this mentality that everyone is different and I have to respect who they are. Even the smell of this person, I got used to. And I was like, oh my gosh, he smells so bad and stuff like that. At the beginning, I was curious because I wasn't used to, right? But then my dad would explain to me, like, this is the way he is, this is his possibilities, and with respect. So going back to how we are, how everyone is different, I think we need to embrace diversity and respect who they are. We always say um, in Spanish, I think in English is treat people the way you want to be treated. Mm. And I don't agree with that. I used to agree with it, but not anymore because I have an amazing coworker who taught me that that's not necessarily that way. So when I moved to the United States, the Latino culture doesn't have, I'm not a morning person. I don't know if you ever heard that before. Yeah. So when I used to work at UNC, as Latinas, and I'm talking about Latinas, all Latinas would come to the office and say, hey, I would say, hey, everybody, hi, 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 to everybody as soon as we walk into the office. And I have some coworkers that would call everybody by their names. Hey, Sacha, Sacha, good morning, Sacha, Sacha. So I remember having a coworker and I would say, hey, Leslie, how are you? And she wouldn't say anything to me. So I was like, what is wrong with this person? So one day she called me and she said, I'm going to ask you a favor. In the mornings, don't say anything to me. Don't say hi. Don't say anything. I was like, I was taught that way. And she was like, I'm not a morning person. I don't want to be bothered by anyone. And it bothers me when you say good morning, Leslie. So I said, okay. And at the beginning, like a normal human reaction, my ego, what is wrong with this person, right? And then I realized that I was like, wait, hold on. This is so interesting. She's not like me. She doesn't want to be bothered with the morning, with the good morning words, basically. The way we were raised, the way for me is normal, but not for her. So I was like, that is so cool. So I have to respect the way she is. And I don't have to say good morning just because I was taught that I have to say good morning to everybody. So I went to a class. I don't remember what kind of class because I always try to learn as much as I can. But there was this teacher who mentioned that we should really think about that. Um, how do you say that? Say, I guess, treat people the way you want to be treated. And they say, does it really have to be that way? I was like, no, I like everybody to say good morning to me, but not everybody likes to be greeted that way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I have learned that we have to treat people the way they want to be treated. It doesn't mean disrespectfully. We always respect, even if somebody talks to me in a bad way, and that this has happened. I mean, this is one of the most challenging situations. I mean, um, not situation, but uh, condition of my job as a businesswoman. I have to learn self-control. I have to learn to be so respectful, um, because somebody can come to the restaurant and be so angry at life that they would take it out with me or with my staff. And I need to learn to suck it up, not say anything, just put a smile in my face, even though in my brain I'm maybe saying something to her. Again, because that is a normal reaction at the beginning. But then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm wondering what this person is going through. And just be um, respectful, understandable. And one thing, again, is to be flexible and not to take things personal. Yeah. Because I don't even know who I am. I don't even know I was going to react the way I thought I was never going to react. Or I am going to say things that I thought I was never going to say. So I don't think we know ourselves. And then we want to control the way people are. And I think without even controlling who I am. So I think that is very important to me. And that's the way I try to live as much as I can. And of course, I have people that drives me crazy. I have customers that drive me crazy. But I have personnel that drives me crazy. But I learned that's a challenge to me. That's an opportunity to enforce what I'm trying to, my philosophy to live my life, basically.
Yeah, and something that I really like from your story, it was from the time you were working in Chapel Hill. You actually learned through others' experiences that you wanted to do what you wanted to do with your life, and you with your job. Some other people they don't either have the opportunity or they have the opportunity, but they don't really do anything about it. But you kind of experience their realization in life, through their life, and then you were like, wow, like I should really do something different.
Yes. Yes. But I think we need to start with ourselves, looking ourselves first and start seeing what we need to change, how we can improve things in ourselves. And then just open your eyes every day that you wake up and say, this is going to be an amazing day. I'm open, again, flexibility to learn what this day brings to me and take the best part of every experience of this life to take it for my personal growth, basically. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, without people who are different to us, it would be so boring. And then where will you have the material to learn, to improve, to grow? So if everybody would be the way you like, or the way what you expect to be, what is the point?
Yeah.
So I think I like to learn. I mean, to take an opportunity every day, every experience. And as human beings, unfortunately, the most difficult experiences are the ones that teach us the most.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think flexibility and understanding that everyone is different and everyone literally is a different world than where you are and where you come from. It teaches us and it helps us to be more open minded and to understand that we just don't know anything or we know very little.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very important to realize that there is way more things that we don't know compared to the things we know.
Yeah.
Nora, this has been very very nice. Is there any final remarks that you wanna talk about?
Um, one mistake I made is like you mentioned about leaving my work at UNC. If somebody wants to um, follow their dream, don't quit your job until you don't have something. I have learned. Um, if I would go back those years, I wouldn't have quit UNC until my business started.
Mhm.
Um, and I was literally living on my savings and stuff like that, which I'm glad we have paid all the debts and everything we had, but it was unnecessary. So it was just my ignorance again, um, to do what I wanted to do without preparing myself economically as an adult person. Um, it was unnecessary. So it was just my ignorance again, um, to do what I wanted to do without preparing myself economically as an adult person, um, to fly. I feel like I'm flying right now and I have no idea where I'm going to stop, how I am going to stop, but I'm living as much as I can the present, and I cannot be more grateful with all the opportunities that life has given us as a team, as a business, as a person. So again, life is too short and let's follow our dreams, but with some advice and some knowledge, to avoid to make mistakes, specifically economic mistakes that can be very hurtful.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah.
Pay attention to the numbers. That's the lesson.
Yes.
And
Dream, do it, but objectively too.
yeah,
Yeah.
fly, but stay grounded by the numbers.
Exactly. Literally. I like that. We should write down.
Yeah, I think that's a good quote.
Yes, exactly.
And can you tell us, repeat the name of the business, where it's located?
Yes. The name of the business is Ta-Contento, makes fresh food, and we are located in Chapel Hill on 15501. We are in between Pittsburgh and Chapel Hill. It's the address is Chapel Hill, but town-wise, it's between Pittsburgh and Chapel Hill.
You will find it. Like, it's one of the most popular places in Chapel Hill,
Yeah.
and really good. I've been there. The food is really, really, really good. The place is really nice too.
Yes, we try to do again. Being loyal to what I want my business to be. I didn't want it to be like a regular Mexican to have the sombreros and the cactus and the chips and salsa on the table. Um, and I can afford to have chips and salsa on the table free, as a lot of Mexican restaurants have. But also it's being loyal to my concept, and also really loyal to the idea of serving and providing fresh, healthy foods. One thing I want to mention is we don't cook with seed oils any longer. We use tallow, which is extremely important because I really care about the health and how healthy we can serve to our customers.
Which is key.
Yes, exactly.
watch what you eat, and exercise.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thanks so much, Nora. Appreciate the time you spent here with us.
Thank you, Gabriel. One more time.
We have one version in Spanish. This is the version in English. We talk about slightly different things, but check them both. They are really nice. In the Spanish version, we have Hans with us, your husband. So it was really nice. He also was bringing his take on different things. But thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here. This was an episode of Tao Global, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
The Art of Listening podcast.